Photojournalism in the digital age is subject to many complexities, and the role of the photojournalist continues to develop. Current debates and discussions surrounding the practice of photojournalism include, but are not limited to, responsible representation, manipulation, citizen contribution, and the evolution of digital technology. With photojournalism expanding and diversifying, there appears to be less control over the nature of the authors of the content produced. In addition to this, the parameters of the professional photojournalist are in a continuing state of flux, a concept predating digital but amplified by it. It can be argued that photojournalism forms the understanding of photography as evidence, as it places a demand on the photographer to create visual representations of the event or issue being investigated. The photograph assumed this demanded role of truth-teller, despite the apparent limitations to representation posed by the singular framed moment. In addition, despite manipulation always being present in photographic history, speculations about photographic truth appear to gain more prominence. The launch of Photoshop version 1 in 1990 meant that the process of manipulation was accessible to anyone, not just the industry. The resulting ease of manipulation provoked a redefinition of photographic meaning in photojournalism. It now appeared to resemble a visual metaphor instead of the original evidential form desired. It is thought that digital technology has increased the potential of the image to narrate. However, it also appears to have cracked the credibility that the photograph used to possess. Analog photography in photojournalism originated around the framing of a moment, which then became heavily associated with straight or evidential photography. These singular images were integrated into the current format of news, acting as an entry point for the viewer. However, when forming a narrative in photography, usually a sequence of images is needed. It can be seen that the singular analog photograph is limited in capacity, bound by the frame. In contrast, the digital image is a coded entity, considered as fluid and able to exist in both the latent and manifest state almost simultaneously. Although still bound by the edges of the frame, digital photography appears to have the capacity to change the current forms of narration. Richard likened digital imagery to that of quantum physics, where the more we try and investigate and examine, the more the data fluctuates. We can extend this metaphor and describe analog photography as chemistry in both the literal and conceptual sense. Although there are many possibilities, each one can be explained by a series of chemical reactions constructed and carried out by the practitioner. It has been stated that the purpose of photography is to be useful in the world, and the capacity of digital technology could take photojournalism further. However, it needs the practitioner to become proactive and take on the responsibility. Perhaps the fluid nature of the digital image will encourage new explorations in this field. Photojournalism itself emerged with the industrialization of news and the surge of mass markets, both contributing to the evolution of the illustrated magazine, or photo essay. The evolution of digital technology has allowed photojournalists and photo editors to explore new methods of narrating events. Where the photo essay was a product of industrialization, digital technology provides the photojournalist with an escape into new forms of media. Time magazine has certainly embraced this liberation by producing dynamic new features such as Snowfall, the Avalanche at Tunnel Creek, Faces of the Dead, and Watching Sylvia's War. The use of moving image, sound, interactivity, and creative data visualization in these features supports the new explorations into the narrative forms, which perhaps could not be achieved through a single photograph. In a recent interview, Stephen Mays described digital online photojournalism as a rolling, continuous stream of information. This environment is perhaps more suited to a creative, contextualized, and comprehensive narrative, moving away from the safety of the photo essay format. The digital native culture has fully accepted the new form of photographic image. The instantaneous nature, along with the developing communication infrastructure, has helped shape the current mass image culture. This dynamic conflicts with the ideology of Walter Benjamin, who discussed the loss of aura through reproduction and proximity. The tools of this mass image culture can be integrated into photojournalism, as demonstrated by Benjamin Lowy, who used a combination of smartphone photography and the application Hipstamatic to produce his images. However, they were met with negativity. Head of a photojournalist festival, Jean-Francois Leroy, stated that using an app reduced the control over the photograph and actually worked to standardize photography. Lowy's images are accessible and familiar, with the aesthetic format referencing social media such as Instagram. This technique allows the audience to relate and consume the content easily. However, the danger of producing this comfortable imagery is is that the content doesn't work to challenge or provoke the viewer, referencing the current trend of mainstream media producing content the audience want to see, not what they need to know. The mass image culture has generated an archive of safe consumable imagery that works to promote, not to provoke. Current photojournalism can be perceived as networked, with citizens and professionals contributing content. The millennium saw an increase in citizen journalism in media, with the 9/11 attacks acting as a catalyst. Imagery from camera phones became more commonplace in photojournalism as the holder of a smartphone can become an instantaneous producer and publisher. This was particularly evident in the coverage of the 2001 Twin Towers attack and the 2004 Boxing Day tsunami, which compromised the still image and moving image content. The raw aesthetic of citizen camera content often convinces the viewer that fabrication is less likely. Reduced naivety to manipulation has even provoked the public to question aesthetically perfect images, despite any status of legitimacy. The proximity of the citizen to their environment could also improve their representation. This insider status, coupled with a greater awareness, generates new questions. With no belief in the image and more citizens taking up the camera, is there actually demand for the professional photojournalist anymore? Manipulation is a process that was present in analog photojournalism. However, it's gained more awareness in the digital age. Both Richard and Rosler addressed the 1982 February National Geographic cover in reference to photographic truth. The distance between the pyramids was digitally altered, potentially destroying their historic association to immutability. The parameters of manipulation in photojournalism have never been defined, which has perhaps allowed instances in which images are changed to achieve conceptual accuracy and aesthetic pleasure. Ethical guidelines in relation to the practice of manipulation must be defined in the context of photojournalism and distance from conceptualism to avoid the exploitation of the audience through naivety. A photojournalist's role can be to construct a representation of victimization and suffering. There is a responsibility on their part to photograph in a manner that avoids exploitation and misrepresentation, far from Barthes' original dynamic of operator and target. Abigail Solomon-Goddard, in her Inside Out essay, examined the stance taken by photographers in representation of vulnerable subjects, which is especially complex when the photographer isn't native to the culture and environment. In Kevin Carter's well-known image, his outsider approach could be viewed as imperialistic, as there was no personal involvement or connection. The distance created in this image reduces the relationship between the photographer and the subject to an observing eye. However, this is the stance photojournalism desires to achieve objectivity. It has produced iconic imagery Barthes would define as punctum, drawing an emotional response. But is that enough to help the victim? A comprehensive understanding of the subject's situation might establish continuing support from the audience. Perhaps the future structure of photojournalism should begin with an objective outsider image to capture audience attention, which then leads to the larger, more informed body of work produced using the insider approach. This could work to solve the notion of subject, exploitation, and misrepresentation. In photographic representation, context is the defining concept. However, it's equally important to establish the right context for the final outcome. The photojournalist's responsibility extends past the action of taking a photograph. The imagery must be circulated to the right channels. Marcus Bleasdale has avoided preaching to the already converted, choosing to adapt his body of work, Brave of the Nation, into different forms to engage with different audiences. In contrast to this, Anna Broomberg and Oliver Chandler created the body of work The Day Nobody Died to comment on the practice of photojournalism. The work was pieces of photographic paper exposed to the sun over the course of the day and has been exhibited in a contemporary art community, most recently in Shanghai. The significance of this work was the conceptual nature, which means it would be most effective in an environment where it would be perceived as art. Although the work is associated with photojournalism, to publish it in the environment of this genre would be taking it out of context and reducing the capacity to communicate effectively. Conceptual photography is a separate genre and needs distancing from the informative imagery normally associated with photojournalism. It would be accurate to state that the digital age has changed the field of photojournalism. However, it would be more perceptive to suggest it has amplified some of the existing issues. The photographer's evidence has had an unstable history, perhaps due to the limitations of the single image approach. The nature of the digital image and the techniques made available through digital technology has facilitated a new mode of delivery, which is more contextualized. Though with the format and With the format of print journalism and objective imagery remaining ever present, it appears that a balance of reactionary and proactive, inside and outside of photojournalism is approaching. However, there are considerations that must be addressed, such as truthful representation, manipulation, contextual information, circulation to appropriate channels, and photographic responsibility. In addition, the parameters of the professional in the current state of photojournalism still need establishing in order to maintain quality in the field. After investigating, it would appear that when confronted with complexity, the photojournalist, professional or citizen, must produce an effective, innovative narrative with the tools available, which depicts a responsible, informed representation of the subject. It should challenge and provoke a response from the right audience and be viewed in the appropriate environment.
Does anyone have any questions for Becky? Yeah.
So it's such a broad topic that you've talked about, so I just wondered sort of how you managed to sort of cut that down, because there's so much interesting scope within it, how you managed to sort of do that.
Yeah, it was really difficult, and I think I talked about the concepts that I believe have the most urgency. But to counteract this issue, I've done a series of independent blog posts as well that I'll be releasing with alongside my research paper online to kind of address that I have taken into account there are more issues than I can investigate here. And it's also allowed me to investigate them in more depth as well. So if anyone's interested, they can read that too.
Aaron?
You talked a lot about the singular image, the problem with the singular image. But in your opinion, how do you think photographers can utilise the singular image rather than be a problem?
I think Fred Richardson said that the single image can be the entry point. I still believe this can be true because obviously you can't display a full body in working formats, but I think there needs to be the full body, the more comprehensive approach behind the single image to extend and to kind of like give the audience the chance to read the whole story and then to take action afterwards. I don't think the single image kind of gives that.
Emma?
If you spoke a lot of the difference between kind of analogue manual photography and digital photography. Has your research influenced perhaps your opinions on them and maybe given you a preference between them based on how they are perceived?
I think it's less about preference and more about the capabilities in relation to photojournalism. It was always addressed that analogue photography was too slow for photographing war and to produce this kind of like 24-hour reactive news environment that people needed. But I think that we're still trapped in the form of analogue photography, so it's just about breaking that boundaries and trying to facilitate new approaches, see what digital technology can actually do.
Do you have any other questions for